Actually, we have two topics left to discuss in this lesson, not just one. So the first one's a small one, though. It's really more of a performance tip, right? Something you should be aware of, and it's also talked about in our online tutorial. So one is the fact that when we retrieve data using a LINQ query, by default, it enables tracking. In other words, it keeps two copies of the value for each property. There's the original value and then the value that we can work with and edit and so on, right? So that doubles, in a sense, the amount of data we have to transfer back and forth when we pull data using a normal LINQ query. What we can do is we can tell, okay, the DB context that no, for this query, we just need the data without the tracking information. We don't need to have that extra copy of everything, and we do that with a AsNoTracking, right? So I could do that right here. I could say doctors dot AsNoTracking. There it is right there. Okay, a couple brackets, empty brackets is all I need, right? So that's a simple way to add a bit of a performance boost. Now, when would we use this and when wouldn't we? Basically, whenever we're just pulling the data, it's read-only. We aren't even planning on making any changes, deleting, nothing, right? So that is true in the index, right? That's also true in details. Now, the big difference is in the index, we could be pulling in potentially a large number of records, right? Whereas in details, by definition, we are getting one. Is it going to make a difference? Yes, technically it does. Does it make a very measurable difference? That's something that I really would have a hard time arguing when you're only pulling one record. However, common sense says that yes, why not, right? You're pulling data from the database. We can add .AsNoTracking here as well. And then that way, because it's read-only, there's no point pulling the extra tracking information. The only other place besides index and details that I'd be tempted at all, certainly for the create and edit process, just stay away from it, right? However, in the initial get for delete, right, here you could do a .AsNoTracking, right? But don't do it in the delete confirm, basically in the HTTP post for delete, okay? That would not be a good idea. Okay, now here we could, we have nothing to include, so we'll just leave it as find async, right? Find async doesn't work with any .include, so that's why in the patient's controller, when we came to the delete, we didn't use that anymore, right? Once we made the other changes. So, okay, that's our little performance step. So I could do that, the same thing here for the patient. So let me go to the top, right? So here in the index, right? I can do a .AsNoTracking. Now it's up to you. If you want, you can lay this out. Some students prefer this, and I don't mind it either way. Typically, I don't like things to get too far across the screen, right? So I can do it AsNoTracking, and there we go, in the index. In the details, AsNoTracking, and away we go. And finally, last place would be in the get for delete, right? We can add the AsNoTracking here. Okay, so that's just a little performance difference, but it's talked about in the tutorial as well, and since it's easy to do, why not? It makes sense. All right, so the last topic really focuses on, I'm going to Control MO, shrink everything down in both controllers. It really focuses on the actual process of doing the edit. One of the issues, okay, if you remember back, we talked about that we protect from over-posting attacks, right? And that makes so much sense here, for example, in the post for create, right? We're creating this new object, okay? But we're saying we're only going to bind these properties. Now, the patient class might have additional properties. There can be hidden ones and so on and so forth, secret properties, and things that are maybe going to be stored in the database. But when we're creating initially, right, we aren't going to set those values through this interface, right? So it's not an issue in create, the fact that we're limiting binding just these, right? And actually it's a protection, because if they did guess the name of a property, right, then we wouldn't want them to be able to modify it just by sneaking it into the form data being submitted, with a number of different tools out there that allow that, right? Allow you to change the data during a post, things like Fiddler and so on, right? Okay, but in the edit, we have a different situation, right? Here for the edit post, the problem is with our current approach, right, we grab the patient record in the get, right? We're going to leave out those secret properties. They aren't even sent down to the client. On the way back up, yes, of course, we want to protect and only update these ones. But the problem is that this object will have lost, right? We'll have lost the values then that might have originally been available when we pulled it from the database here, right? If there were secret or hidden properties. Well, that's not good. Okay, so how do we handle that? We don't want to lose that additional information, even though we don't want to expose them to being updated by this process. So one of the ways, a very effective way to get around that, is not to actually generate the patient object this way. We're going to use a TryUpdate approach instead. So I'm going to completely remove this. Now, don't worry. We aren't actually removing anything in terms of what the information coming into the controller is. We're just going to save it to work with it later, you might say, right? We still get all the data sent in, and it's all available to us to work with in our code. Just we aren't building the patient object that way. And since we don't have it, we might as well get rid of this as well. So what are we going to do? Well, let me show you. So first of all, we're going to go and get the record once more from the database. Okay, notice I'm going to change the name a little bit here. Reminds me of the different approach, patient to update instead of just patient, right? So I get the one copy of the patient to update, right? I have the ID, so that way all the secret and hidden properties that might be in there are still contained in this copy of this class, right? This instance of this class. Now we should, as a good practice, probably check, make sure we actually got it before we try to go further, right? We can do that with a simple check for null, okay? And then just return not found. All right. Now, what are we going to do is instead of just checking model state, right? We actually are going to accomplish that at the same time, but we're going to actually try updating the record we pulled from the database with the data submitted by the form. And we'll do the validation check all at the same time. So basically what we do is we replace this inside the brackets of the if with a different command. Okay. Now it's asynchronous, so I'll start with await. And then it's try update model async. Okay. Now I have to specify what the model class is so I can work with it. It's the patient class, right? Okay. And then in brackets, I use a LINQ expression to do a couple things. Well, the first thing I pass is the actual object, right, to update. So that's my patient to update. Patient to update, right? Then I just need an empty string. This is for a prefix, which we don't need, so I just put that there. And then carrying on, I can just press enter so it doesn't go across the screen. Now I just do a series of lambda expressions to access to different properties. Now these are going to be the same ones that were in the whitelist, right? P goes to P dot OHIP, for example, right? And so on and so forth. So I'm just going to copy and paste the rest of them in. There we go. So first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, expected yearly visits, phone, email, and the foreign key doctor ID. So notice these are the exact same elements that we previously had in the whitelist. So we're fully protected from overposting attacks this way, right? All right, so we still have our try catch, the same way we did before. That's perfectly good. The only thing is we don't have to call this, right? Because we've already updated. We tried to update, and if we succeeded, then that stage is done. So that line can be removed. In fact, we have to remove it, okay? So we just call save changes after that, and then if everything is good, we redirect back to the index. Now, down here, the only thing I have to change is the fact that I've got a different name here for the patient object that I'm working with, right? It's my patient to update. So that's what I put here and down here. And finally, if I'm going to return the data to the view. Okay, so that change, it seems like a trivial one in a sense, but it does guarantee then that if we ever run into a situation where we have those secret or hidden properties, or there's certain things that we're just leaving out, okay, from the user interface, this is the best way to accomplish everything we need to do. Protect against overposting attacks, and at the same time, not take a chance on overwriting any of the data that we're leaving out for now as a secret or hidden property, things like that. All right, so we have to do the same thing in the doctor's controller. Okay. Now, rather than have you watch me go through that step by step, I will actually just do it all at once here, right? Well, pretty much all at once. Might as well get rid of this, the doctor, take that right back to the ID, and then I'll replace the code here. Okay, there we go. So we just call edit. We took the blind out, the whitelist. So we go and we get the doctor to update, make sure we actually have it, right? And then we do our TryUpdateModel, okay, for the doctor to update. We're only updating first, middle, and last name. That's all the properties there are. We save changes. Notice we don't have to call update because that's already done. We save changes, redirect back to index, and then we have our same catches, right? If there is a database error and we've added a model, right, then we'll just return view, re-display the data for the doctor, and any validation messages will be added as well. Okay, so that's good. We've got it all covered, and that's the final major change. Is it important? Absolutely. Okay, we should always do the TryUpdateModel approach for edits, and we're going to see later on there's another reason why it's a good idea, but that's enough for now. I think we've covered everything we need to for this part of the development work.